A couple hours ago, President Obama wrapped up his end-of-the-year press conference. Check out the way he looked at the first one. This is back in 2008 when he was first elected president. And now, a whole lot more gray hairs. Also a lot more perspective and also a lot of questions specifically about Russia today. FBI announcing this afternoon that it supports the CIA's finding that Russia was in fact trying to help Trump win when it started hacking into Democrats' sites here. Also, President Obama today defended the way that his administration handled this whole episode.
When I look back in terms of how we handled it, I think we handled it the way it should have been handled. We allowed law enforcement and the intelligence community to do its job without political influence. We briefed all relevant parties involved in terms of what was taking place. When we had a consensus around what had happened, we announced it, not through the White House, not through me, but rather through the intelligence communities that had actually carried out these investigations. And then we allowed you and the American public to make an assessment as to how to weigh that going into the election. And the truth is that there was nobody here who didn't have some sense of what kind of effect it might have. I'm finding it a little curious that everybody's suddenly acting surprised that this looked like it was disadvantaging Hillary Clinton, because you guys wrote about it every day. Every single leak. About every little juicy tidbit of political gossip, including John Podesta's risotto recipe.
The president also had some very strong words for Republicans who admire Vladimir Putin.
There was a survey, some of you saw, where, now this is just one poll, but a pretty credible source, 37% of Republican voters approve of Putin. Over a third of Republican voters approve of Vladimir Putin, the former head of the KGB. Ronald Reagan would roll over in his grave.
And the president was also asked about Trump's phone call with the Taiwanese president and how that could impact U.S.-China relations. Here's what he had to say.
What I've advised the president-elect is that across the board on foreign policy, you want to make sure that you're doing it in a systematic, deliberate, intentional way. And since there's only one president at a time, my advice to him has been that before he starts having a lot of interactions with foreign governments, other than the usual courtesy calls, that he should want to have his full team in place, that he should want his team to be fully briefed on what's gone on in the past and where the potential pitfalls may be, where the opportunities are, what we've learned from 8 years of experience, so that as he's then maybe taking foreign policy in a new direction, he's got all the information to make good decisions.
All right, let's bring in our panel. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Scott Vanderhoff, former 5-term Republican, Rockland County exec, co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. You know, when I watched it this afternoon, I wondered if part of him envies the lack of filter of his successor, or that he's not built that way, and that, you know, down deep, you know, he wouldn't conduct himself even if he could get away with it, you know, or as Dominic says, you know, say what he really thinks the way that Donald Trump does. It's going to be interesting, I think, how he's remembered.
It is, but, and you know, I've been a critic of many of his policies, but I thought he was spot on today. I thought he was measured. I thought he was articulate. I thought he was careful where he had to be. I thought he was very open, far more open in my view than he has been. It's almost like he's a relief that he's leaving, you know, and like a lot of us past guys, it's just, you know, it's just, now I can kind of talk. And so I don't think he envied that. I think he actually was saying, I think you're going to miss me the way it's measured, it's what have you. I mean, some can say he talked a little too long on each of the questions, but the questions were 10 pieces each for one of the.
But you also got the sense, Andrew, that in compared to what we've seen in the since the election, in the tweets maybe, or in the victory tours, the difference, regardless of your politics, who you like, this is somebody who takes reading, research, coming to formulaic decisions, some would say professorially maybe, but compare that to, I can tell you in 20 characters what I say versus somebody who's giving a long, drawn-out but thoughtful explanations about foreign policy, precedent, etc.
Well, you're comparing Barack Obama's performance and presentation to that of Donald Trump. I would say you could expand that to almost any president in modern times tends to act more deliberately, tends to be very careful with their words, because their words have actions. Markets move and armies move based on the things that come out of the President of the United States' mouth. We do not have that clearly with the President-elect coming in. But to the point that you were talking about before on style, Dominic, you've said many times, wait until Obama's book comes out.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
I don't think there's going to be all that much there.
Oh, I
think
do.
I think he's a measured guy
I do.
to his core. I think he's an intellectual to his core.
Don,
I don't think
to
that whole lot goes.
Andrew's point, I don't think we had the clip, but Michelle Obama sat down with Oprah Winfrey. The interview, I don't believe, is aired yet, but there was a clip that came out. And she said, now people know what it's like when there's no hope. That's why hope, remember hope and change and all that. So there was very raw. Now, I think she went a little too far because clearly half of the country, they saw Trump as hope or a change that they wanted. But nonetheless, Barack today also clearly made it that he said, listen, in talking about the Russians and their influence and the hacking, and never saying that it cost the election one way or the other, he said, with so much at stake and so many things of policies that can be undone, clearly talking about his own legacy here, this thing got turned, in part because of a foreign enemy. So he clearly has on the mind all that he did in 8 years could quickly go like this, starting with Obamacare, but go all the way down, and obviously with 2 Supreme Court nominees that could be filling the bench. So I do think you're right. I think there will be a book, and I think the guarded and measured Obama we saw from today, there'll be one that's a little bit more raw, I think.
I'll bet my life on it, that he's going to write a book, and in part that book is going to be about being a black man in America in the most powerful office in the world, and at times he was still treated like a boy. As simple as that.
We also, what I thought was interesting, I know I got to hit a break here, but among the things, when they said, what do you think about the phone call he made to Taiwan? Now, we played the clip where he said, you should have your team. But he didn't think that maybe a reset with a relationship with China was a bad thing.
No, it was remarkable in the sense that he admitted failures in Syria. He talked about his successes, but almost the entire time was devoted to foreign policy and foreign affairs, which we all know is really on edge on a number of areas, China and Russia in particular. But he admitted that his policies weren't quite right, and that we needed, his quote, fresh eyes on it. I think that is a remarkable thing for any president to say. He could have said, well, we're succeeded. We didn't.
No, there was some honesty there. And Andrew, I'm way over, but on the Russia front, he made it clear he won't just be a passive occupant between now and January 20th. He's going to keep ringing the bell. The FBI today basically has now taken the same line as the CIA. There'll be more about this story that'll continue to come out. It's going to be interesting with the appeasement that Trump has shown for the last 6 months. Can you really do that with all these smoking guns? And the report will be released before he leaves office.
It will. It'll be interesting to see what conclusions it comes to. But look, we know Obamacare and his legacy is linked to that, and that's in jeopardy under Trump. I think Syria has a chance to undermine his legacy. But I think the way he's handled the response to the Russians, I disagree with his read on it. And I think there was a little bit of CYA going on, a little bit of look at how good a job I did, all things considered. I think most of the Democratic left disagrees with that perspective at this point. And how he handles this and what else comes out,
Yeah.
will impact his legacy.
This much I do know. More is going to come out here before January 20th when Donald Trump's sworn in regarding Russia. All right, coming up next, the transition continues and many things are under the radar. That is people focus on the big stories like we were talking about the Russian hack and also conflicts of interest. Now, we'll take a look at those, but also some other stories that you just got to hear to believe.